Hi there, and welcome to The Wrap, simple news updates for busy people, brought to you by myself, Sarah Evans, Verashni Pillay, and the team at Explain.coza. Now, just like you, we were astounded by the brazen attempt by evangelical pastor Shepherd Bushiri to skip the country this week. In this week's edition of The Wrap, we wonder whether it isn't time to start talking seriously about regulating religious institutions like Bushiri's enlightened Christian gathering. In political news, we've got you covered if you missed the events at the Zondo Commission this week, but you're dying to know whether Zuma will actually ever testify. Plus, did you know that racism is actually making us sick? Let's dive in. Now, self-proclaimed prophet and pastor Shepherd Bushiri and his wife Mary made headlines this week after they skipped bail and fled the country. The couple and two others are accused of money laundering and fraud to the tune of over 100 million rand. They were rearrested in Malawi after handing themselves over. The question of how the Bushiris managed to steal away mid-proceedings is one thing. Quite another is how they did business in SA under the guise of bona fide religious operations undeterred for so long. When it comes to regulating churches, SA is behind the curve. Botswana previously shut down Bushiri's church after it could not provide its audited financials for the previous 3 years. In Rwanda, pastors have had to obtain a 3-year theology degree to register a church. In SA, churches are pretty much unregulated, despite the mushrooming of dangerous movements that have been probed for fraud, sexual abuse, and the distressing trend of asking congregants to consume grass, petrol, or worse. State regulation is a dirty phrase for the faith community, but that means they must come up with solutions to prevent snake oil salesmen from starting churches and taking their followers for a ride. They'd have to behave like other institutions in terms of being transparent about their financial affairs. For example, many churches continue to operate as businesses despite being registered as public benefit organizations. Then there's the lack of racial transformation at the helm of many white evangelical churches, which are not pressured to meet BEE targets. It would be in the sector's best interests to start regulating itself. Remember the media tribunal that the ANC threatened to impose on the media in SA? That was a grave threat to press freedom, but it jolted the media into action and it tightened up its own rules. If churches don't want the government to regulate them, they need to come together and up their standards. It's possible to do so and maintain the sacred independence that churches rightfully value. Evangelical churches in the US are also at risk for predatory behavior and financial misdeeds. So to combat it, some have formed a self-regulatory body called the Evangelical Free Church of America, which mandates strict controls around how the organization is managed to reduce the risk of fraud and corruption. It's time for SA's churches to come up with solutions fast. Now, Chief Justice Raymond Zondo emerged indomitable following this week's drama at the State Capture Commission, and it's a big win for both him and the country. He conducted himself impartially and fairly, despite irritating attempts by former President Jacob Zuma to paint him as biased. On Monday, Zuma's legal team argued that Zondo should step down because he was biased against Zuma. Zondo took a full 2 days to carefully consider Zuma's application, opting not to brush it aside instantly as he easily could have done. On Thursday, Zondo said he would not step down as chair of the commission. He pointed out that Zuma had waited nearly 3 years since the commission was established to raise his concerns. Then there's the fact that the commission repeatedly tried to get Zuma to come and state his case. Zuma appeared once with a rambling story of conspiracies rather than answering the allegations against him, as he was supposed to do, and he refused to come back. Meanwhile, on Monday, from $1 million flat in Dubai, his son Duduzane Zuma tweeted what is surely the most rhetorical question of the last decade. What did my father do? Oh, Duduzane, where do we begin? Zuma has been implicated at the commission by no less than 34 witnesses. As president, Zuma was in charge when most instances of alleged state capture took place. Here's a quick reminder for Zuma Jr. of the allegations the former president needs to account for. First of all, firing former finance minister Nhlanhla Nene after he refused to approve the controversial nuclear deal which the country could not afford. He tried to get government's communications department to spend millions of government's advertising budget on the Gupta's newspaper, The New Age. Zuma also interfered in the appointments of executives at state-owned enterprises like Transnet, attempting to appoint people who could help his friends, the Guptas. That's according to former Public Enterprises Minister Barbara Hogan. Zuma was also allegedly present when former ANC MP Feki Mentor was offered a ministerial job by the Guptas at their home. Now, if history has taught us anything, Zuma will use every legal trick in the book to try to get Zondo removed or delay proceedings. His team is already planning an appeal, but it will be hard to convince a court that Zondo hasn't done his job. Stay tuned to Duduzane. In news briefs this week, raise your hand if you've experienced racism and felt sick to your stomach. Well, it turns out this may no longer be a metaphor. Racism is actually making people sick. The US's largest association of doctors, the American Medical Association, or the AMA, has called for racism to be declared an urgent public health threat. The AMA says racism, quote, negatively impacts and exacerbates health inequities among historically marginalized communities, end quote. And it says structural change is needed to address the problem. The AMA says doctors also need to acknowledge how racism and unconscious bias has had a negative effect on medical research over the years, and that the profession needs to support policies that will combat racism. About time. Back in SA, racism and structural inequality is pretty much a national pastime. Now raise your hand if you'd like to see our doctors follow their American counterparts' examples. More than 400 staff members are facing retrenchment at the public broadcaster, the SABC. News of the planned retrenchments came to light this week with a video of SABC reporter Griselda Lewis tearfully scolding management over its plans in a staff meeting. It's a tricky situation. Nobody wants to see workers get retrenched, especially if they're not the ones at fault for historical financial problems at the SABC. It's a result of years of political interference and bad management at the state broadcaster. But there is better leadership in place now, who will have to make tough decisions and deal with their predecessors' sins. The SABC cannot continue as is. It will need R1 billion if it doesn't make those cuts, and it's us as taxpayers who will ultimately pay. Remember, the SABC is showing signs of a turnaround as its coverage of the news becomes increasingly professional and impartial. It is a crucial part of our democracy, and as the primary source of news and entertainment for millions of South Africans, its survival is absolutely critical. Now, authorities are investigating how one of the matric maths papers was leaked to matrics in 8 provinces this week. The Free State missed out. It's not clear whether the paper will be rewritten, Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga said this week, but the penalties for those responsible will be harsh. Leaks here are pretty rare, with the last big leak in Limpopo in 2015 and 2016. In 2014, there was a matric exam cheating scandal in KwaZulu-Natal and in the Eastern Cape. It's a big deal for the all-important matric exams, especially since it's been a torrid year for our matrics and learners in general, thanks to COVID-19 disruptions and learners having to study from home from the first time. We wish them luck for their exams, and we'll be watching those results early next year. In more political news, we're wondering whether ACE is going to pull a Zuma. The Financial Mail's reporting this week suggests that ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule has used the warrant of arrest that was issued against him last week as a launchpad for a presidential campaign. Remember how Jacob Zuma played the victim after being accused of corruption and rape and managed to become the president? Yep, same WhatsApp group. Both Zuma and now Magashule appear to be painting themselves as the victim of political conspiracy theories. Now, as always, we have to issue our political reporting alert. Stories like this are generally based on anonymous sources and nothing is confirmed yet. But we've scoured what's out there, and according to the city press, Magashule and his allies are plotting his comeback. They plan to use his court case to allege that President Cyril Ramaphosa is using the Hawks and the NPA to stifle his political opponents. While this strategy worked for Zuma, it's doubtful whether Magashule will be so lucky. The ANC and the country has changed a lot since then, and it doesn't seem like anyone outside of Magashule's merry band of supporters really believe he's a victim. And Ramaphosa, for now, appears to have enough support from the party's top brass to survive Magashule's attack. In medical news, the future for HIV prevention is looking bright. A new drug that could dramatically reduce the risk of contracting HIV in women has been called a game changer. Top health reporting outlet Becky Sisa said that 6 injections a year of a new long-lasting ARV could dramatically bring down HIV transmissions. A study conducted in 7 African countries has reportedly shown that the drug is 89% more effective than current HIV prevention drugs on the market. The drug won't be available for the next few years, though. It's a significant development for women, who reportedly make up 60% of new HIV cases on the continent. They're vulnerable to sexual and other forms of abuse, and in many places have very little say over what they can do with their own bodies. It's a timely reminder of just how far HIV research has come. A virus that meant a death sentence just a few decades back is now not only manageable like any chronic illness, but is also possibly preventable. In COVID-19 news, we know that we're all trying our best to be responsible and wear masks, but unfortunately, if you've been wearing masks with valves, you've been doing it wrong. New research shows that the valves don't protect the wearer from tiny infectious particles like COVID because they allow for air to be passed through, which kind of defeats the purpose. Remember, masks are supposed to prevent the spread of COVID-19 particles by stopping them from moving between people, and valve masks don't work like that. These masks are best used by construction workers because they protect the wearer from large particles. So how do you choose the right mask? Well, head on over to explain.coza and have a look at the latest mask guidelines, which were issued in October by the Department of Trade and Industry. In more COVID-19 news, 2 COVID-19 vaccine trials are showing extremely promising results. The results of 2 pharmaceutical giants' COVID-19 vaccine trials are out. Pfizer's was 95% effective in preventing COVID-19 in its final trial results, while Moderna's was pretty close at 94.5% in preliminary results. It's incredible news and a testament to modern medicine. But complicated technical statistical information aside, some qualifications are in order. As the Conversation reports, the Moderna trial seems to prevent symptoms. It's not clear whether it prevents infection altogether. However, the Moderna vaccine has an advantage over Pfizer's. It doesn't need to be transported in as cold temperatures as Pfizer's does, possibly making it easier to distribute at a large scale. But much more research is needed to get the full picture, so watch this space. Now, much of this would not be possible without a $1 million donation to vaccine research by Dolly Parton, writer of the hit single, Vaccine, 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 Vaccine. Sorry, we just couldn't resist. Many are thrilled by her contribution, with a rabbi pointing out on Twitter that Jewish tradition holds that each generation is saved by 36 righteous people, and Dolly Parton is one of them. In African news, we've told you before about the internal war that started in Ethiopia this month. As we said, it's a bit like President Cyril Ramaphosa declaring war on the Western Cape and deploying airstrikes on civilian areas. But imagine that as an ethnic war between a vendor-led presidency and a Xhosa government in the Cape. It's very serious. Why haven't you seen much about it? Well, because the Ethiopian Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, has ensured an information blackout. Journalists haven't been able to get into the Tigray region, whose local government has had long-running tensions with Abiy's regime. Neither have human rights groups like Amnesty International, though Amnesty has received photos of bodies lining the street from civilians who were able to briefly get cell phone signal. The Mail and Guardian's The Continent reported this week. Beyond that, the world has no idea of what's happening to the people there. Now, journalists who have taken a stand are being targeted, with several having been arrested. There is also a frightening ethnic angle to the persecution. As we've told you previously, Ethiopia under Abiy has become a success story. He even won the Nobel Peace Prize last year. But Wow, how things have changed. Abi's initial democratic persona of one who tolerated media critique has given way to the makings of an authoritarian powermonger. Pay attention to Ethiopia. The more pressure and eyes on its government, the better. Now, looking ahead. Zimbabwean author and activist Tsitsi Dangaremga's latest book, This Mournable Body, is up for the prestigious Booker Prize, and as you're listening or reading this on Thursday night, we're going to find out whether she wins. This comes as the 61-year-old author faces charges for inciting violence during anti-government protests in Zimbabwe. This Mournable Body is the third work in a trilogy that began with her 1988 novel, Nervous Conditions, which the BBC called one of the top 100 books that shaped the world in 2018. She'll be back in court on November 24th, hopefully as a winner. And that's it from us at The Wrap, a product of Explain.coza, simple news summaries for busy people. Remember to share the love. Tell your friends to sign up for our updates at explain.coza/subscribe. Till next time, goodbye from myself, Sarah, Verashni, Tash, Arti, and Nanchi.